You know how they tell you it's not the destination, it's the journey? Well, after watching Barbarian, I'm here to tell you it's also the final journey to the destination that matters. If that makes any sense. I'll get around to what I'm talking about in a second, or in a bit. Through the course of this review, I wanted to talk about the things that I liked about Barbarian first and foremost. Now, I'm a bit late getting to this. Normally, I would have gone to watch it when it first came out, but I was in the midst of preparations for Dragon Con, and then I was at Dragon Con, and then I came back, and then we had family here, and then I've been editing the Dragon Con videos, and so I finally got around to seeing Barbarian earlier this week. And I was looking forward to it because I'd heard good things about it from horror fans, not just the official critics, right? But the audience, the actual audience. And the audience is probably the best measurement of how I'm going to feel as well. Not always, but it's generally pretty accurate. So I go in to see Barbarian. I kind of wish I hadn't watched the trailer. I've heard it suggested that you just don't watch anything before you go in, and I think that's a good idea because I knew certain things that were going to happen because I'd seen the trailer. I wish I hadn't known that. However, that has nothing to do with some of the things that I felt were wrong with this movie, which specifically are things that happen at the end. But to start off, let's begin with the pros. This film was put together very well. The storytelling was very good. This doesn't count the stuff I'm going to talk about later, the cons. But I really liked the way certain scenes were filmed, the camera work done on the scenes. Like there's a scene where she's walking from the porch to the inside of a house and the camera follows her. I thought that was pretty cool. There are other sort of little things like that it shows very quick, sometimes quick, choppy editing just to show her doing certain things and getting it done without showing you her walking to do this and then her doing this and then her walking, just like quick things like closing the door, popping the lock, putting a chair up against the door, that sort of thing. Sorry, I'm shaking the camera. So I liked how that was done. I also liked that this film took its time to get to the creep factor. Well, you start off feeling the creep factor, okay? Because the opening shot, there's this creepy, unsettling, like vocalization sounds that you hear, just eerie. And she's sitting in a car. It's dark. It's rainy. She's outside the B&B, the Airbnb where she's going to be staying. And so you start off knowing this is going to be creepy. I mean, you knew that already going in if you've seen the trailers, but whatever. If you haven't, just the posters kind of give you an idea that this is a horror film. So I like it set that tone. And I also appreciated her struggles with the key box outside the door, because I'll tell you that's the exact same type of key box we had at the house at Dragon Con, and it was a pain in the butt. Whatever, I digress. I just thought that was kind of funny. But I like how it gives you this sense of isolation, creepiness in the neighborhood where she's spending the night at this Airbnb. In the beginning, it's all dark, so she can't really make out a lot of stuff. She just notices it's very desolate. There's no lights on in the houses, things like that. I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as possible, but just little tiny details that I'll throw in there. Generally stuff you've probably already seen in the trailer. And I felt that really set the mood. And I also liked the portrayal, the very realistic portrayal of the socially uncomfortable situation, like when she shows up and the guy's at the house and they both rented the same house and they don't know what to do, and you have this sort of, this wariness factor on her part because there's this guy and she's alone and she doesn't understand what's going on, and neither does he either. But you're definitely left with a feeling that, oh my gosh, what, this guy's a creeper and he's going to do something to her, that sort of thing, because it's told more from her perspective, and you're kind of on edge because you don't know when something is going to happen. You know something's going to happen, you just don't know when, and the story takes its time getting there. I also appreciated that it did a really good job of setting up character development, and you so like her, you start off, you're introduced to her first, and then the character of Bill Skarsgård, if that's how you say his last name. His name was Kevin or Keith. I can't remember. It starts with a K. Anyway, whatever. And you get to know him through the course of their time with each other in the house. They have these discussions and little banter back and forth, and you get to know him more. And then it's like 20 minutes before a little hint of creep, but like an obvious hint of creep. But then that kind of goes away, and then there's another like 10 minutes or more, probably 15 minutes before more creep stuff happens. And then maybe around that time or a little bit after, something really like happens, and there's an abrupt shift in tone and change of scenery, and it jumps to another place completely. And at first I was like, is this the same movie? Did something go wonky with the projector? Because that's happened before, where the wrong movie starts off. So I was like, what is going on? But I was just so fascinated because I did realize fundamentally, yes, it's the same thing, but where are they going with this and what is happening? So then this other character that's introduced, and you get to know him and his situation before it puts him in the midst of stuff that's happening as well. And then you have another shift in time and environment and a totally different character. You have like this time jump backwards, showing things that happened at the location, and then you jump forward to the situation. So there's like a lot of gear shifting that goes on. And at first it felt a little, it felt a little jarring when it was happening, but at the same time I was like, oh wow, this is really cool. I'm digging this. I really like how they were putting this together. This is a great movie. And then as stuff was happening and it was getting just more intense and scary and creepy and everything, and camera angles with like the camera at different angles and just really setting the tone and the mood. And I'm pulled into it, and it just gets even more like, there are some scenes that are quite uncomfortable to watch. I will tell you that right off the bat. I was cringing and grimacing and just, it was it's gross and disturbing. I'm not going to get into detail, but it just builds up, and this stuff is happening, and the story's taken its time to unfold. It's about an hour and 40 some minutes. And of course the credits are, let's say, like 5 minutes or whatever. Sorry. The credits are like maybe 5 minutes. So it's like an hour and 42, hour and 47, whatever, something like that. It's less than 2 hours, more than an hour and a half, less than 2 hours. And it was feeling, I wouldn't say long, but it did feel like that the story was just really stretching out. Not really moments of boredom, and not a ton of downtime, because in the beginning you're really drawn into what's happening. You don't know what's going to go down. You just know it's going to be something bad, and then it unfolds and it unfolds. And I felt like things were paced very, very well. And then here's where the problems came in. It was like the final act-ish, around there. And this really well-crafted story started to regress or dissolve into just ridiculous horror movie tropes and situations. And I kid you not, my eyes were rolling at some of the stuff, because it was such a disappointment to have this really solid story up until the end, and then your typical ridiculousness happens. Now, I like ridiculous horror stories as long as I know that's what I'm getting myself into, right? And by ridiculous, think your typical, like, oh, you think the X person or creature or whatever, you think this person or creature or whatever is dead and then not. Someone saying something and then right at that moment the very opposite happens. Superhuman sort of stuff happening when the character involved is not supposed to be superhuman. Ridiculous scenarios where death should have happened but it didn't, that sort of thing. And also really abrupt and clunky gear shifting with regard to a character's actions. Now, I would say with regard to this particular character, you already have hints of this, so it's not necessarily a huge surprise, but the way it happened, it was like there was some stuff missing in between. You felt it felt like there needed to be a bit more of a smooth transition from this to that, and it felt like it was just kind of rapid and clunky, and it was just like, really, come on. It's like they built up to this great ending, and then they didn't know how to bring it to as solid of a close as the journey had been up until the destination, which is why I said what I did at the beginning. So because, there have been some films that kind of start out weak, but because it has such an awesome middle and end or an awesome ending, it elevates my enjoyment of that film as a whole. But to have the opposite happen, where you have a really solid start, decent middle, solid middle, but then the ending falls apart into ridiculous stuff, then to me, that negatively affects the entire movie. And that was ultimately what I came away with after I saw Barbarian. And it's kind of weird because, it had so much going for it. It was so, I was thinking when it was done, I was like, man, so close, but no cigar. It just couldn't, weak writing when you see it. Just like, I'll give you an example. Game of Thrones, as angry as that makes me to think about and talk about. Game of Thrones. It wasn't so much the destination, depending on what you're talking about. Like, there was things that happened with some of the characters that was just ridiculous. But the problem was, once the writers ran out of solid source material, which was GRRM's original, his books, even though they knew where these characters were supposed to go, they didn't write them there in a very coherent or solid or well thought out or really good manner. And that was kind of what happened here in this movie for me. That was what I thought about when it was over. I was like, wow, this reminds me of the mess that was Game of Thrones. It was like all this lead up, all this potential, and then it just crumbles into silliness. I can't rate this film as high as 4 or 5 stars. I feel like it does deserve more than a 2-star rating. I'm kind of torn between 2.5 and 3, and that's mostly because of the botched way the ending was arrived at. And I saw this called 2022's Malignant or something like that, because 2021 had Malignant. That was this surprise hit and people really liked it and whatever. It was kind of divisive, I remember. But I have to say, I enjoyed Malignant. I feel like Malignant was actually a more solid story than Barbarian, just because Malignant, all the way through, these things are happening and you're like, what? That doesn't make sense. But then by the end, it does make sense. It's explained. As ridiculous as the scenario is, whatever, it's explained and you get it. With this one, it's not that the explanation was the issue. It was just the final several moments of the movie. It's hard to explain without giving away spoilers, and I really don't want to give away spoilers, but boy, it's tough because, well, I just gave you the vague sort of basic outline as to what the problem was with some of the stuff that happened at the end. It's like if they could just go back and just fix that stuff at the end, this movie would be just so good. But because that's not really what they did, I can't attach the positive, glowing label to this film that so many others have been giving it. And I hate that because it really had me up until then. So, whatever. Maybe when you watch it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Maybe you'll completely disagree and you'll feel like, oh no, it's no big deal, it's horror or whatever. But I like horror, and I get that horror has certain formula, a certain formula that goes along with horror movies, but I also like it when it's more than just your typical horror. And so when something that has started off in the way that this movie started off in, and then sort of regresses to the point of crazy, ridiculous, nonsensical horror situations, that's just, for me, a disappointment, fundamentally. And so, yeah, it's just mixed feelings I have about this movie. And I don't know, I can't think of anything else to add to it. I just realized that I forgot to start the slideshow, so I'm gonna have to put the pictures in manually in the video editor, whatever. Those are my thoughts on Barbarian. It's been kind of rambly, but a lot of that has been because I'm trying to word things without spoiling too much. So I don't think I have anything else. I'm gonna wrap this up, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.